Before each new season of television starts, there's a group of people who meet in a room and they decide what happens to the characters you love and the characters you love to hate. Who's in that room? What are they doing? What are the secrets of being in that room? That's what we're talking about right now. Welcome to Right Now. I'm Jennifer Shookman and I'm your host. I'm really excited to have my new friend with me, Joel McCrary. Joel is an actor, he's a writer, he's a director, and he's a producer. That's a lot of hats to wear. But you may know him best from some of the roles he's played, such as the mechanic in George's Twix Bar Seinfeld episode. You remember that one? Do you remember that one? The mechanic, yeah. Or as the Genovian.
Genovian.
Yeah, there we go. Anthem singing Prime Minister Motaz from the Princess Diaries movies.
Yes, you did that very well because that was a complicated introduction. It was not easy. I don't like to make things easy.
Just for the record, I had Genovian right in rehearsal, but didn't get it right on camera. So. You've done a lot of stuff in this business. How did you get into this? How did you get started on that?
I started out as a kid.
You started as a kid?
I did.
That's amazing.
I did.
You're the first guest all week who's done that.
Really? Really? Actually, if I'm being honest, I started as a baby, then a kid. But I wanted to be an actor. I watched Tim Conway on the Carol Burnett show, and he was making people laugh, and I said, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. And so I said, I want to be an actor. And my mom was like, oh, well, you should take these musical theater workshops this guy teaches in town. I was like, I don't want to be that kind of actor. I want to be an actor like the Fonz, you know. I want to be a cool actor. And so I kept putting it off. And then one day my mom and dad said, we got tickets. We're going to see The Music Man at the Hattiesburg Civic Light Opera, Hattiesburg where I grew up. And I was like, no, I'm not going. We bought tickets. You're going. And they made me go. And I went, and I loved it. It had such a profound effect on me. I was laughing. I was, on the verge of tears at times. Of course, afterwards they asked me, what would you think? It was all right. But the next day I said, I was thinking about it. Maybe I'll do that workshop because the guy directed it who taught those workshops.
Oh, nice.
So I ended up doing that, and then that led to doing community theater. I did that all through high school. Then I went to the University of Southern Mississippi, the Mecca for theater studies. Yeah, actually a really good school for what it is. I did that for a while. And then I ended up in Orlando, Florida, which I know a lot of the viewers are from there as well for this. And I spent a number of years there working for a company called SAC Entertainment. Okay. And we did street shows for Epcot Center and some other stuff around Disney. And then we ultimately opened our own theater downtown Orlando, which is still running to this day.
Wow.
Running strong. I haven't been there for a long time, but I understand it's still going well.
That's amazing. Yeah. There's nothing, I think, like live theater. Yeah. And movies and TV can touch us, but live theater does something.
Yeah, and our bread and butter was doing improv comedy was the main thing. We did original shows and that type of stuff, but improv comedy was the thing that really took off, and this was early 90s, and so it was kind of new at that point. Not a lot of people knew about it, so we started doing it, and we just had lines around the block. It was,
wow. Well, it's an amazing thing when you see people who are really good at it doing it. I'm not really good. We have a mutual friend who taught a class in it at a school I was working with, and the answer to everything that happens is yes and I was like, no. So,
well, that's the natural response. It's so easy to go into. It's like somebody says something. It's like, oh no, we have to deal with that. No. So it's real easy, but it's so. Good improv. There are few things that I find more entertaining, and there's nothing worse than bad improv.
Yeah. This is true as well.
And you don't need sets or costumes or anything like that. So anybody can do it. So there's a lot of bad improv. I've seen a lot of. I've been part of a few bad improv. I'd like to think most of it's been good. Yeah.
So you're in Orlando. Somewhere you got out to Hollywood.
Yeah, I was working there regularly. Nickelodeon did a lot of the production in Orlando at that time, and so I was working regularly doing that. And it was actually, I went to church, and there was a really good sermon on revelations of all things. And I came out with the revelation of I need to move. And so I decided LA is where I wanted to go. I was deciding between New York or LA. But I'd done well in Orlando, and I was like, I could stay here, and I'd be very happy. Yeah. It'd be a great life. But I would always be like, what if I had gone to, one of the bigger markets? And so I said, okay, I'm ready to do that. I don't want to be, I think it was the Church of Laodicea. I don't remember. Whichever one was like you look good on the outside, but you've lost your passion inside. Whichever one that is. That was the one I related to. I said, I'm like that church. It's time for me to go and challenge myself and do something.
You know, God is an amazing creator. And I think that has to be one of the most creative acts of having an improv player listen to a sermon on Revelations in Orlando and decide, I need to go to Hollywood.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty
exactly.
impressive.
Yes. Well, it's a living word, so it's an abstract work of art. Says something different to different people at different times. But so I did. I moved out here, and then fortunately, within a year, I was booking commercials and was able to make my living on camera. And then within 2 years, I started working doing television, not just commercials, but actual television shows and some films here and there. And booked an episode of Seinfeld where I told the Twix bar, and that opened a lot of doors. Once I had that on my resume, then suddenly casting directors who weren't interested in seeing me and now are like, oh, you did Seinfeld. Oh, why don't you come audition for our show? So mid to late 90s, early 2000s, I did a fair amount of television and film work. And then I hit a little bit of a roadblock where I had to have spinal surgery. I was heading, couldn't figure out what was going on, but it was, I had this accident where I fell, and so going to the doctors, my legs went numb, muscle control, I lost that, balance was gone, so I couldn't walk without Canadian crutches, and was heading for a walker, and then it kept getting worse, so I was thinking, well, I'm heading for a wheelchair. And the doctors couldn't figure out what was going on. So finally I got to this one doctor, he did a test. I said, well, good, we found out what's going on. And this is a funny story. When he came in and said, the good news is we can do surgery. It's like, well, why? Because it took forever. And I went through like 24 doctors over like half a year, 6 months or something before finally, I said, why was it so hard to find? He said, well, this condition we don't normally see in people like you. That's people like me. What do you mean? And he said, well, we normally see this in dwarves and dachshunds. I looked at him like, what? He said, wiener dogs. I was like, no, I know what a dachshund is.
Yeah, right.
I just was not expecting that. But it was this condition I was actually born with, and I had this fall that may be symptomatic that revealed the problem. And you talk about just like weird blessings. If I had not had the fall, I would not have been symptomatic, and it wouldn't have revealed the problem until it was too late to do any kind of surgery about it. But if I hadn't had the problem, because it was a thickening of the bones, the fall was severe enough, I more than likely would have broken my back and been paralyzed for that.
Wow.
So it was like this really awful thing to go through, but ultimately was a blessing, and I can still walk.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. All right, I just have to ask, was one of the symptoms barking?
Only when there was a full moon. It was more of a howl. Yeah,
that doctor was amazing to figure that out.
Yeah, he was. Actually, he was. I'm so thankful for it. But they did surgery, and I still have some issues, but I can walk, and we thought I was heading for a wheelchair.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So that stopped things for a while. How did you get back started then?
That's another strange blessing, or not strange, but blessing that happened during that, because I couldn't do on camera. So I just started doing all this voiceover work, because I could still go and do that, in crutches, and they'd put a chair and a microphone here, and I could still do that. So I started booking all this voiceover work, and it started happening a few months before I actually had the issue, and during that time, at which it ended up being with everything, figuring out what was going on, and it was almost 2.5, 3 years that I really couldn't do on camera. So then that changed kind of where I was, because casting directors were suddenly like, oh, we don't know who you are anymore, or the ones I knew had quit. There were new ones who came. So the industry, so it was a little bit like starting over. But I got back to working in 2010. I found, well, I'm booking jobs, but I'm not making the money I did, and I don't have money to pay my mortgage. I'm gonna have to sell my house. And I really got angry at God. I was like, what are you doing to me? I've been faithful and trying. I've turned down jobs other people had taken. All these kind of things. So I one day had lunch with a friend who had been even more successful than I was, and he had a big illness in the family, marital issues. He was losing it, foreclosed. I could sell my house. I wasn't upside down. He was upside down and being foreclosed on. So he had all these, and I kind of went home and said, I've just been a brat. And I got on my knees and I said, thank you. I can sell my house and I'll be okay for a while. I'm not upside down. So
I could walk again.
yeah, I changed my attitude completely. Yeah, I can walk, and it was when my attitude changed. Honestly, it was the next day, maybe 2 days. I got a call from the show I had been doing a recurring character on. And he said, "Hey, have you ever thought about writing on a show?" I was like, okay, I could do that. And I was like, "You're going to pay me? I'll do that." And so I ended up as a writer.
Oh, that's amazing. I want to hear more about what it means to be a writer. We're going to take a break, but you want to come back and hear more about this with Joel McCrary. What an incredible story already. Let's find out what's next after this break. Welcome back. I'm here with Joel McCrary, and he's just had this incredible story of feeling God's call to Hollywood, coming out here, having some success, and then literally having everything taken from him, and then realizing that maybe he needed to give something back in the sense that your attitude was wrong. And so you are offered, like people struggle for years to become a writer, and somebody called you up and said, "Have you thought about doing this?"
Yeah, I booked this job to play Bobby Wasabi on Kickin' It. It was a kid's show on Disney XD, and it was I was very thankful for it, but acting just wasn't paying what it used to, and I was in this position where I was going to lose my house, and so but out of the blue, I got a call from the showrunner, and he said, "Hey, we have a writer who's leaving. Do you want to come in and be a writer on the show as well as continue to do the character you're doing?" I was like, "Absolutely.
Yeah, right?
Absolutely. I would like some regular income. That would be awesome. I'm your guy." And so I went and I ended up in the writer's room, and I went in probably about 1/3 through the first season. Okay. They had a writer that left, and so then I came in, and then I ended up staying for all 4 seasons of the show as a writer, as well as doing the recurring character, and I ended up directing episodes as well.
That's amazing.
Through that, yeah. So it was a great opportunity. It's where God wanted me, but it was not an easy place to be. I had not been in that type of environment, and it was a tough place. It was a tough place. Some difficult personalities. Some people that I really liked, made some great friends, but there were some difficult personalities, and it was, in particular, I think there were people there who were writing on a kids show who felt like I should be writing gritty HBO dramas and all that stuff. And
frustrated writers taking it out on the cartoons.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. It was that. Go ahead.
Let me back up a bit for people who aren't familiar with this. We're all familiar with what an actor does. We've seen a play. Our kids have been in things. We're all familiar with writers who toil away in a room by themselves. What exactly is the writer's room, and who's in there?
Writers are in the writer's room, oddly enough. Usually you have your showrunner, and every show is different, and it comes down, the showrunner is sometimes the creator, not always, but it's the person that is in charge. That is the number one guy, and they're usually in the room, and they're the ones you go to and say, "Hey, an idea for a story." Jack goes to the laundromat, and while he's there, he finds this, and he thinks, "Oh, these are magical pants," whatever the story is. That's a good episode. I should write that down.
I should write that down.
Magical pants. So anyway, and then the showrunner goes, "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard," or, "Well, there might be something there," and then he changes it so it's his own idea.
Jill goes to the laundromat.
Right, exactly. And it's a brand new idea that he came up with, or she.
And if you're a smart writer, you go, "Yeah, that's a great idea."
Absolutely. Right? Well, that's one of the number one things that you learn in the writer's room to make yourself valuable is a lot of times the person in charge, if you make them think it's an idea, it's like, off of what you said, it made me think maybe this. And it might have nothing to do with what they said. But then they go, so I have partial ownership of that. Yeah, I like that idea.
I like what I didn't say.
So in the writer's room, it's the writer's in there, the showrunner will be in there, whoever his second in command is. And the showrunner usually has to, they spend a lot of time there, but they'll be going down to the floor where they're shooting. In our case anyway, we We're in the same building. Our offices were in the same building where we shot the show. So we could go down to the floor and watch rehearsals, that type of thing. But every writer's room is slightly different in what they want. So you've got the writers. In our case, I think that was about 5, maybe 6. And then the showrunner, so that's like 7. And then you'll have a writer's assistant. And then he might have a second assistant that if he needs to go do something, then they'll come in and take over. But they're not always in the room. But the writer's assistant sits on the computer, and as we are coming up with generating story ideas, then he's taking notes of those and stuff that the showrunner is going, oh, that's interesting. He makes sure he writes it down. So if it's just a germ of an idea, and sometimes that's what you come in with. It's like, I don't know, this might go somewhere. In our case anyway, our showrunner was fine with us coming with that. But if we came in with a fully formed story and it's like, here's the beginning, here's the middle, here's the end, here's where the act breaks are. If you had that, he was even more likely to go, oh, we've got something here. And then we would, as a group, talk about it and say, well, what if instead of this happening, you went this way? And so we would get the story kind of parsed out that way.
So the writer's assistant is almost capturing the brainstorming and ideas that are on the table so they're not lost.
It's the hardest job in the room.
Oh,
I don't know how anybody does it. And also, it's the one that takes the most flack. You know, if they don't write something out, they didn't get something, you know, Jim said this joke over here, why didn't you write that down? You know, and the showrunner, and it depends on the showrunner's personality.
But if it's like me, I always think the idea I had before I fell asleep the night before was the best idea the next morning. But if I capture it at night and write it down, I'm like, who came up with this dumb idea? So I can imagine if they miss something, everybody's like, that was really good.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and sometimes in the moment you'll say something and a line will come out perfectly, and then you go, wait a minute, what did you say? I don't remember how I said it. How did I say it? And if they're there and they're really good, they'll go, this is what you said. And it's like being a courtroom stenographer, really.
Yeah, wow.
And that, having a good writer's assistant is huge, makes for a really good writer's room. And we were fortunate. We had some really good ones along the way.
So this is a collaborative effort then? Somebody comes up with an idea, the idea gets...
Yeah, ours was... You know, the writers' rooms that I've been in, they've all been that. I've worked with the same showrunner. So, but other ones are different. I've heard of other ones where it's you sit there in utter silence and you just are jotting down, writing out, and you fully form. If you've got an idea, whether it's a line or a joke, whatever, you have it fully formed before you present it. Because if you don't, then the room goes, oh, that's great. Yeah, really professional. You know. Whereas this room, which was better for me for sure, was more of a, well, here's an idea, maybe something like this, and then somebody said, yeah, that's good, but what if you know, it was more collaborative.
So it's
and with my improv
background, yeah, exactly.
Exactly. My improv background served me so well.
I bet.
Well for that, yeah.
So a minute ago before I interrupted you, you were saying that there were some tough personalities in the room and it would be a tough place. So if it's this collaborative environment, what's going on that's not so?
Right. Well, it's collaborative, but it also is...
competitive?
It's competitive. It's... personalities who, you know, in my case, think they should not be working this job. They think they're better than this job. Whereas I'm always like going, it's, you know, writing for kids, and it was big, almost like sketch comedy that I came from.
Right.
So for me, it was great.
You're delighted.
I loved it. So, but other personalities didn't so much. And I'll give an example, and I'll try to express this without painting the picture, but not offending anyone.
No.
Let me know if I. So my first day, the showrunner had not told any of the other writers I was coming in. They knew me as the actor who played Bobby Wasabi, and then suddenly I come in the writers' room and sit down. I think they all know that I'm coming in, that he's told them. He hasn't told anybody, and I just sit down, and they're all looking at me like,
what are you doing in here?
What is your deal? And then and he came in and didn't say anything, and they're still just like, why is he? And they don't know. Finally, I guess on one of the breaks, I said, did he tell you guys that I was, he hired me as a writer? No. And so I came as an actress, though. There was a little bit of a, interesting.
Yeah.
So I really had to prove myself.
Oh,
I had to prove myself.
Yeah, that's starting behind there.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, put me a little bit behind the 8 ball. But fortunately, it worked out, and it was people I got along with in the end. But one of the guys who was sitting next to me, my first actual introduction to him, sitting next to him in the writer's room, is he had drawn a swastika but out of male reproductive organs.
Oh.
And
Oh.
he slid that picture over to me and said, pointed to it and said, "That's my," and he had a name for it, which I won't repeat. That was my welcome to the
He
writer's
wanted
room.
a reaction out of you
Yeah.
from that.
Yeah. And so, like I was talking about, they feel like, I'm working on a kid's show, but I'm edgier than that. So it would become a competition between who can push the envelope, be the edgiest, push it the further. And that ultimately, of things I experienced in the writer's room, became kind of tame compared to other things that I was kind of like confronted with. And so that made it a really difficult, that part of it was really difficult.
So I'm just imagining myself on the first day of a new job where I want to show that I'm good. Now already they don't even know I'm here, and so now I really have to prove myself, and somebody passes this, and totally against everything I believe, but they're wanting some kind of reaction out of me. It's against, like I'm horrified probably by it, but if I show that, it's a weakness.
Right.
So how do you handle those kinds of situations where they're really just testing you to see what you'll do?
A lot of times you kind of diffuse it with humor. I don't remember exactly what I did. I think I did something that's like, "Wow, that's some really good artwork you got there." So I don't know what I said, but I said something, and I think I made them laugh. And so,
which is a win for you.
Yeah, exactly. So it kind of diffused it, and I do think he wanted me to be really shocked and horrified, and the fact that I wasn't, it was just kind of like took it in stride. I said, "Well, interesting. I'm not going to hang that on my wall, but thanks for sharing your art." Whatever it was I said. So that kind of thing. For me, I knew it was where God wanted me to be. So I was like going, okay, I can do this. Also, I needed the money, which is a big motivator. If it weren't for those things, I don't think I would have stayed. But what I found that got me through that was every morning I would pull up into the parking lot, and before I get out of the car, I would go to a verse, and it was the put on the full armor of God, which is, since I got my Bible app, I am so bad at remembering, because I just boom, it's right there on my app.
No, but put on the full armor of God, where it talks about all of the different.
And it was the shield, and I would read that verse, and I would mentally put each piece of armor on, and so you can stand against the schemes of the evil one. And so it was, so I could go in there. And the interesting thing I noticed about the verse is I wasn't supposed to fight or change anything. I was supposed to just go in there and stand. But I also got some great confirmations along the way that I was in the right place. This old crusty guy, been in Hollywood for years and years, came and said, I've been in a lot of writers' room. It's really great having you in there. You're like a light in the room.
Oh, wow.
And those are literally the words, this crusty guy who did not know the words he was using.
That's amazing, because that's what we all want to be, is a light into a dark place.
And so he said exactly what I am. It's like, okay, all right, I'm in the right place. I know I am, and it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Oh, when you're in a hard situation like that, to have some sort of confirmation that this really is where God wants you, so that you can keep going and doing what you need to do every day, is an amazing gift in those moments. We're going to hear more from Joel, but we've got to take a break right now. Come back right away, because we've got more to talk about after this break. Welcome back. We're talking with Joel McCrary, and you've had, a lot, and I'm sure we haven't even just touched the surface or skimmed the top of it. What would you say to a girl in Orlando who's doing some theater and maybe doing improv or doing something like that, who wants to come to Hollywood? You've had some highs, you've had a lot of lows, you've had some in between. What would you tell her before she comes out?
I think one of the most important things to have, if you're going to come out here, first make sure that's really what you want to do, that you are not going to be content and happy doing community theater in Orlando and staying there. Much easier path and can be just as creatively satisfying. But if it's like, no, I really feel called to go out there. If you come out here, the first thing you want to do is get plugged in with a community of like-minded believers. My church and the friendships that I've formed through that, and the people I've been able to work with through that. Like this movie, I know you talked to Robert Lee about his movie that I was in, and it was a lot of people that I worked with, and I knew him through church and ended up in that movie with him because of that.
Yeah, you're referring to Robert Lee, who came in and told us about his movie on a previous show called "Can I Get a Witness Protection?"
Right.
And you had a very important role in that movie.
I had a role. I don't know if it's
Yeah,
very important.
they were all important according to Robert.
right, exactly. But for me, and earlier I was talking about when I had the spinal surgery, it was that community that supported me. And I know my mom and dad, who are very supportive, they came out when I had that surgery and were here during that. My sister did too, just to kind of be there for me. But they said, we're so comfortable leaving you because we know you're in great hands, because they really saw the community that I had. So getting that community and finding people that you can support and talk to who understand where you come from.
That's great advice. Wherever you are, wherever God's calling you to be, to finding that community, and especially in a place that can have a lot of darkness. To be a light, you need to also have a place to recharge those bulbs when they feel dim and there's a lot going on. We're excited to have heard about some of the secrets of what goes on in the writer's room, and we're hoping that you learned something about that, and just say some prayers for the writers of your favorite shows. They need to be held up as a light in that darkness. Thanks for being a part of our show today. We'll see you next time.
Amen.